Wonderful. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our July 2021 Jupyter Community Call. I'm Isabella. I'm going to be your host today, and I'm super excited to see everyone here. We have a lot of different people today, I think, too, so also super excited to see that. Welcome if you haven't been here before, and of course, thank you for returning if you have been here. This is a call where we try and celebrate across Jupyter communities, try and unite projects, share cool things, just generally get excited and remember what we're here for, and of course, coordinate larger community discussions. Two things I want to remind you though, this is being recorded as the ominous voice just told us. Whatever that means for you, these will end up on YouTube at some point. And two, we are part of a Jupyter event right now, so that means we are held to the Jupyter Code of Conduct. That includes me, and with that, I'm ready to go. I think we have anything on the short report items first. We're just going to follow the agenda, which I will link one more time, actually. So starting with quick reports. Oh, we do actually have one. Awesome. Is that Michael? Would you like to speak on that?
Yes, hello. My name is Michael Milligan with the University of Minnesota. I'm one of the developers on Batch Spawner and Wrap Spawner. This announcement's a couple months old, but I saw that it hadn't been made yet. We did get out new releases for both of those packages. Batch Spawner is specifically for cluster and scheduler users. Wrap Spawner is not specific to clusters and scheduling, but it is used by much of the same community.
Fantastic.
So, yay, we were happy to get that out.
I love your Jupyter background too. And
so
congrats.
Do I. Thank you.
Congrats on the release. Thank you for sharing. Any thoughts on that? Any last minute people are like, oh, I didn't talk about this release. This is your moment.
I'm away from keyboard, but we're planning on 3.1 of Jupyter Lab today, this afternoon, which will be our first release with Real-Time Collab. So we'll make an announcement on the Discourse channel later today. If you want to try it out at a time, it's available from pre-install, but it'll be available as a final release later today.
Nice.
Hooray.
Well, I'll throw one in because Mike is here. I had a pull request accepted to the Jupyter Authenticator, enabling Globus groups for group management inside of Authenticator. So if anyone out there is using Globus Auth for their user login to Jupyter Hub, that feature is now there and works. I think it works well.
Fantastic. And yeah, that's great. Oh, I love to hear those words. Thank you. Anyone else? I will give you a few seconds of silence.
There's a hand raised.
Yeah.
Oh, there is. Thank you.
I thought I'd just give a quick update from the Binder Hub side of things. So I think a few months ago, we started blocking launches from public clouds because of those crypto mining abuse. There was a new PR merge a few weeks ago. That means there should be a new workaround. So hopefully, if you're trying to launch something on my binder and you're safe from Amazon or whatever, it should hopefully work now.
That's super awesome, Simon. Thank you. We have a tester in critical need of this. So thank you.
Yeah, well, if you get them to try it out, and if it doesn't work, give us some feedback.
Cool. Isabella, you think you can ping Thomas and see if it works?
I was going to. Yeah, I think that was like
Radical.
2 weeks ago you fixed that. Thank you so much. I was watching that
huge.
issue closely.
Thank you.
But yeah, I know it was a difficult problem, so I really appreciate people spending time on that because, yeah, especially for accessibility work, we have a lot of people sharing software via that. So thank you.
I got a quick one. So we've been looking to get Jupyter Video Chat, which is the one that lets you get Jitsi inside of your lab. Looking to get a new release of that out. Got it mostly working. It's now ready to go. But if there's anybody that uses that, I'd certainly like your feedback on either the binder, off develop, or on the docs. I'll drop some links in the HackMD. But the things that it does, it works. The 060 will work with Jupyter which we had a release last week. I don't know, it was kind of low prof. And we'll also work with RetroLab. It makes so many tabs, but that's what RetroLab does. So if anybody's interested in that, especially anybody that self-hosts, you know, I'm very interested in some feedback on that piece.
Awesome. Do you have a link to the? I know which extension you're talking about, but would you mind linking?
Yeah,
the
I'm
video
finding I'm logging into 70, you know, all the things to update. So I'll
Thank
get
you.
that in a sec.
I shared a link to a binder that has like a pretty big environment with Jitsi and RTC enabled if folks want to try out that combo too.
The ultimate collaboration space, for this moment at least.
Hopefully, for an hour.
Yeah.
For an hour.
Yeah. This is a great set of short reports. Anyone else inspired? Wonderful. Well, thank you all. That was awesome. I love these just to see all the different things people are working on. So thank you for your updates. And with that, we're going to go to the main agenda items, which since we have a pretty full agenda today, hooray, it made my day for sure. I'm going to watch the time a little to keep it close to 15 minutes with discussion. So that's just kind of your forewarning. And the first person we have, though, is Matthias, who, welcome. I don't actually think I've seen you on a community call in a while. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you very much. Let me know if you don't hear me well, because as I said before, I'm tethering, so I probably don't have a really good connection. And I will start with two short demos, so then I can stop sharing my screen, and then we can discuss. So I'm going to show you two things. Oh no, I can't share because what's happening? I need to open system preference and restart Zoom. Oh gosh, I hate Zoom. So I'm going to try to do that while I'm talking. So two specific things with respect to, especially when you work with schedulers. One is often when you have Jupyter Notebook and a scheduler, and you want to do quick iteration, you might want to restart your kernel. But the problem is that you go back to the scheduler and it takes a long time for the kernel to restart. So I've developed a small extension that act as a sort of proxy for the kernel. Can you see my screen now or not yet?
The whole thing.
Okay, so let me try to move it around, which basically starts instead of the IPython kernel, is used as a proxy. And so you can issue a magic command that will restart the kernel on the remote compute node without having to go through all the scheduling process, because from the server point of view, the kernel has not restarted. And so it looks like that. You can define a variable, check that it exists like normal. You can change the value. And if ever you issue the command restart, the proxy will intercept this magic, not send it to the kernel. It will actually kill the kernel and restart to the kernel. And now I should have a fresh new session. This also allows you to do a couple of things, like you can send other magics to this specific proxy that will, for example, start to display all the messages it sees going through on the output channel, so you can really see what's happening if you ever have to debug a connection issue or something like that. And so, for example, if you do 1 + 1, here are all the messages that are exchanged between your notebook and the kernel. Right now, it only works for IPy kernel because I hard-coded it. But if you have other kernels, there is no reason for it not to work for other kernels, because it's just a simple proxy. And you can deactivate the debugging after and go back to the normal way of executing. And what I'm going to show you another things we're working on. Especially for people who want to parameterize kernel and want to, for example, choose resources. I have in the HackMD, I have a couple of links, and the goal is to have kernel with parameters that can be quickly changed from a user point of view, and we decided to experiment with JSON schema. So for example, in your kernel, you can say that you have JSON schema that describe the amount of memory you have, the number of CPU you have, and whether or not you have a GPU. and we have this small extension still working on it that allow you to either directly edit all the kernel spec values, or expose some of them using JSON schema as something like relatively easy, like a drop down. And if you want a GPU or not, if you have a multiple queue for your kernel, allow you to change that, and it will automatically update the relevant parameter in the kernel spec, so that you can quickly, as a user, not have to be really aware of all the details of how kernel spec works. And so that's about it for the demo. Oh, no, I have one more demo. The same thing for parameterization works in a terminal. So if I do Python main.py, it should pick up some kernel spec, and I can reparameterize them. Oh gosh, that's super slow. And so same thing, it uses, let's say I want to have 123 CPU, and then I want to have a lot of memory, and it will hopefully rewrite the kernel spec with the amount of memory I ask, the number of CPU I ask, and all, even the kernel spec name now have the values I have entered. And so we are trying to bring that more into core Jupyter maybe at some point, so that users can parameterize their kernel spec. And I'm going to stop sharing so that I gain back some bandwidth and can hear you back. Any question?
I know it's a wow from me, but yeah, Sylvain has questions.
So Sylvain, you're muted. I see you speaking, but you're just. And Nick says the text user interface is savage. Yes, it's with Prompt Toolkit. Prompt Toolkit have crude things to do things, and I'm way more fluent in Prompt Toolkit than I am in React and JSON schema, and I am struggling with TypeScript. And I think Sylvain sound is on because I heard a small amount of noise when you plugged something.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay, sorry about that. And this is so much aligned with stuff that we sort of had in the backlog for so long that I may have like tons of questions. And so one is like, do you have somewhere in the kernel spec or as a companion file a JSON schema specifying the required parameters?
So right now, and that came from some discussion with some of our clients, we actually put the templates in the metadata of the kernel spec, which allow you to send a notebook to someone. And if you send the notebook to someone, then they have the templates in the metadata, and they can retemplate. Like, for example, if they don't have 200 gig of RAM, they can change to have 100 or 10 or something like that. So we do
embed the
metadata
of the notebook file, right?
Of the kernel, right now the kernel spec, and we want to embed that into the metadata of the notebook as well, so that the users can reparameterize if they want to. I mean, right now it's really a prototype. Especially there are some questions, like in particular, if you use a scheduler, you may want to have, say, the GUI that says 100 gigabytes, but you need to pass the amount of memory as kilobytes to Slurm. And so we have workaround for that, where you can define, you can't really execute arbitrary code or things like that jumping in the notebook. So for some things, we allow to have mappings so that it's slightly outside of the scope of JSON schema. I can send you the link to the repository and the various user stories. I actually return user stories even if I don't like that, to show what is possible. And we're showing that. So I'm showing that here today to get feedback and see what would be the requirement, what are the scope in which you want to do that. And there are actually two sides. The side that I showed here is only the UI, and I want to point to Kevin works. I saw Kevin is here down my screen about kernel provisioning that was merged recently, I believe by Steve a couple of hours ago or hours ago. That basically would let your system, as far as I understand, tell Jupyter which kind of resources you can expose, and then the UI side could show that to the users. So there are many ways to handle that.
A few years ago, there was a Jupyter core dev meeting, and we made like working groups on different subjects, and I got to sit for a couple of hours with Kyle Kelly, and we actually wrote a document about things that we would like to do in that space. And some of the ideas were to, for example, tag some of the arguments as things that ought to be saved in the notebook, because when you restart a notebook, you want to find the same arguments as the last time. And others that, for example, if you have connection credentials, that should not be saved because they are, private. There were also like all kinds of discussions. I'd be super happy to be part of these discussions, because we've been actually finding some issues with kernel specs that get duplicated in 20 different versions or 30 different versions depending on the use case.
I will ping you on the relevant repo, which right now is called KSMM, and I don't remember what it stands for. I will at some point. I think it's Kernel Spec Manager. If you have a better name, I'm happy to get it.
It's awesome. Thanks, really. Thanks for the demo. I'm really happy I could join before the end.
And that's it for me as far as for demos. So I'm happy to discuss more about that later if someone has more questions.
Sure.
So is this a server running a server extension to get the application?
So this is running both a server extensions to be able to manipulate kernel spec, because there is no good API endpoint to do that, and the front-end extension for JupyterLab. The front-end extension here is mostly a mock-up. Some of it works, some of it doesn't work, because I just don't understand React. I don't understand JavaScript actually, in general, or why. But yeah, you could. I hope to move that to a more core things. In particular, we directly manipulate kernel spec, and I'm wondering if the notion of kernel spec templates by itself as something different than kernel spec would make sense.
Nice, thanks.
Just as a follow-up, I believe Eric was planning to come to the server meeting this Thursday to talk more on this subject as well, if anyone wants to join. That's at 9 a.m. Pacific time.
And let me share the link to the community calendar too, in case anyone needs that.
Actually, that's 8 a.m. Pacific.
Yeah, you should be able to find the call in that link I just shared. Yeah, that was awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. Any final thoughts before we move on? We can always loop back too. Okay then. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. And so, Matthias, you were saying those were both the items you had on the agenda at the top?
Yes.
Okay, just checking. Thank you. Okay, now we have Rick and Roland. Are you ready to present?
Thanks.
Yay.
Yeah, I was going to do slides, but I think I can keep this shorter than that. And I see that Roland didn't make it because we're also on Pacific time, and 8 a.m. is not super early, but it's a little early. So so I know at least one of you, Matthias, because Matthias has helped me present and invited me to present on security before. Some of you, I used to work at San Diego Supercomputer Center running HPC systems and help users run stuff. And I worked for Globus for a while, helping with projects. Globus does data management and auth stuff, but I have an astrophysics background, and so I used Jupyter and Python quite a bit for that side. But what I'm talking about today is we're doing that classic, like, let people know what we're up to and then get your input. So Roland and I, after the first round of community workshops, we submitted for a second one on security. We wanted to start developing, hopefully, a set of best practices for different use cases. to say like, hey, if you're a user running on your laptop, if you're a multi-user installation, like, you know, the documentation is out there, but maybe we can send some consolidated guides and give some recommendations. That workshop, as you can guess, got delayed, and we got approached by Anna and Jason and others to restart it. And so we started the planning process. So currently we're on track to host a workshop sometime in April or May next year. Ohio Supercomputing Center has offered to host, so we're likely to do it there in Columbus, Ohio. We want it to be something that would be very appealing to a broad range of participants, and so we didn't have to be the classic do it at Berkeley or NERSC. The outcomes we're looking for are things like best practices guides, things that we could help show users, like if you're going to run Jupyter, this is what you should consider for different cases. Along the way, we'd really like to do a holistic review of the documentation and sort of say this is the areas where security documentation could be consolidated or improved, because right now it's kind of in its individual components like Jupyter Hub, the notebook server, stuff like that. And then along the way, maybe some recommendations back to the community about what we could do to have security be part of the development and community processes. There's already some really important things like the security group, the signed key and stuff like that that's clearly distributed. But as we're all aware with the current environment, the current news cycles, security is becoming more of a concern even for research and academia. And so we'd like to say, hey, what can Jupyter do, even though we're a very distributed, diffuse project, to bake some stuff in? And there's areas in particular that we want to start focusing on. We've done interviews. Since we have a long lead up to this workshop, we didn't want to lose the time. And so we've started doing interviews with folks like Bloomberg and the Broad Institute and UV from Berkeley on their experiences running Jupyter. And we're going to start broadening that to sort of hear what their needs have been. We were also lucky enough, the NSF has a Center of Excellence for Cybersecurity called Trusted CI, and we have an engagement with them to support this activity. So we're getting help from some of the folks that are on the NSF cyber infrastructure side for working on security. And what we'd like to know from this group is, who would you say is appropriate to approach, talk to when you think about development processes and awareness for security? In particular, I'm really glad that I just heard the notebook server call made, because that seems to be a key component. Like even we were talking with folks like the Broad, is a lot of folks are running the notebook server with their own proxies, and that matches what we do when we work on our laptops or we're working on systems. So we'd certainly like to talk to you, and we've got some ideas. Like there are some programs like the Core Infrastructure Initiative Best Practices Badge, and whether or not something like that, approaching a component like the notebook server, could serve as an exemplar and a trial for other parts of the Jupyter development process. So in short, Roland and I, with help from Tiffany, also from NERSC and Trusted CI, are trying to see what we can enable the community with for security. This is kind of our first step into letting people know. And if we're welcome on the Thursday call at 8 a.m., we'd like to come talk there too, and see if that's an area where we can have a closer interaction during the run up to the workshop. So please, any feedback, or we can just roll on to the next item.
I can't well articulate in this space how excited I am to hear all the words you just said, like personally.
Yeah, it sounds great.
And
yeah,
Thorin, I see you're at UCSD, so I'm at some point I should probably say hi to you.
Yeah. Hi.
The best practice
hand
badge
raised as well.
Nick and Tony in unison. I don't know how this raised hand, I don't see this interface well. I'm seeing Nick's hand raised, so why don't you
If you
go
look
ahead.
in the participants list,
okay.
And then you just try and keep track of who raised their hand first. And I think Simon had his hand up first.
Okay, Simon, go ahead then. Thank you.
This sounds really interesting. So obviously I'm coming from the Jupyter point of view. And I think one of the big challenges with Jupyter is it's not just distributed, it's also that we've got very wide community participation. And for instance, one of the difficulties I have when I look at maintaining Jupyter projects is Jupyter Jupyter maintainers can't document everything. So there's a lot of community tutorials, a lot of community editions, and so on. And so how do we keep that secure, but without posing a barrier to community contributions?
Yeah, we very much acknowledge that. This is something where we know that there's additional effort required, and it may take new contributors before or perhaps somebody comes in with some dedicated funding specifically for this, because it's one of the more thankless activities that people don't see outside of the shiny interfaces and stuff like that. So yes, Simon, you're absolutely right. Nick, I think you had your hand up.
Nice. Yeah, so the best practices badge is a great process. It's a great checklist. It's self-certified. It's not like you have to go ask somebody for it. So that's I've found that very effective on, if you go to a security conscious organization, they just want to know if you have done a checklist, and their checklist might be different from your checklist, but some of those map to, some of them have different ones between them. So that's a really great step forward, and it's also another place to get Google Juice. Second point, so we've been doing all this space around WebAssembly-based kernels. The enarcs project, which I believe is in my copy-paste buffer, is a place I'd like to see that go at some point. Right now, systemd containers are good, but they only work on certain flavors of Debian with all the stuff, hotted up all the way. If WebAssembly became something that we could rally around as something that works in all the runtimes that we care about, that might be an interesting place to handle the elephant in the room, which is, remote code execution as a service. And so there's certainly some stuff moving towards that way, but that whole workflow is nascent. But having provable, not formally verified, but well verified runtimes that you then can load your user code into, and really understand, irrespective of where you're deploying it, what that baseline is, that you're going to be better off because it's better designed than, say, the Docker OCI whatever runtime for that. So I would be very interested in seeing some stuff happen in that direction.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I'm glad that you guys have a positive reaction to the best practices badge, because I felt it was similar. It's like, it's not a NIST standard for security, but it's like, it is one of the few ways an open source project can sort of say like, hey, we've looked internally and we're trying to do something positive, and it has some adoption. I mean, it's backed by Linux and stuff like that. So I think it's worth trying and see how it does. The point, I also like your point, like it feels like two sides of it. One is, what is process and governance and other stuff around security, and then what are specific areas in terms of actual development that are going to benefit our users and the code and be enabling for usage and deployment, and enarc sounds like one of those. Okay. I think Matthias was next with his hand.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what was said, and I think one of the difficulty with everything being distributed is that no one is responsible and things fall through the crack. So we recently received 2 potential vulnerability disclosure, and like on one of the security mailing lists, and only a few people responded, and all the people who responded and try to get engaged or to do the fixes, we don't have much time, and I think we should probably have a known group which is really responsible for responding in a timely manner to everything which is security related, and have a process to really make sure that things get followed through. Because I believe there is a third potential thing that is not too critical, but was overlooked and has not been fixed yet. So yes, I don't know. Like Nick said, that it takes money. Yes, it takes money, but we need a way to funnel this money. We need people who are always watching and who really like respond quickly. I also want to have a way for the community to organize timed releases. Like when there is, for example, if we had to do an emergency fix, we can't just make a normal release or merge and do the release a week later. We have to coordinate with vendors and say, hey, we're going to release at that specific time. You want to update in the hours that follow. And I'm not sure how to organize that as a community versus when you actually have clients that you can communicate to in a private way.
Yeah. Well, Matthias, I did mean to send you an email, and I apologize for not doing it sooner because you've been engaged in this and helped us get started. And like this example is one where I know that Jupyter is spread out, but there are some folks at the top who really try to say, what are key things we have to focus on? And when it comes to security, having some policies like, we will prioritize security work such that, if a vulnerability comes in, it gets a rating within a few days, say, for example, and then, we will work on it and do a coordinated release. Like it's putting a little bit of structure that fits the community slowly over time. So I think it's one of the potential outcomes, and it could be a recommendation from the workshop or the process that we're doing. So, because these are real needs for the community.
I have one more important question. If I don't think I see any raised hands this time. Is there a place we can follow up on your work, on the workshop, anything like that?
Yeah, so we have a discourse post. We actually, once I'm done chattering, I'll find the link. And so Roland and I aren't on Jitter, but we do try to follow that discourse post. And so you're welcome to reach out to us there. And of course, there's our emails and stuff like that. But I think for this, the discourse would be the most appropriate.
Awesome. Thank you. I am so looking forward to this. I hope we hear more about it in the future, even though I know that's kind of far out still. But
well, yeah, but this is what we're kind of considering it as, even though the workshop will be next year, the more we get done along the way, the more focused the workshop can be on stuff where we feel like we really need people in a room discussing things. So the more we can work out at a reasonable pace ahead of time, the workshop can be like, okay, no, we really need to get together to see what developers will commit to in terms of security processes, or to really review a best practices guide or something like that.
Do you have any insight? I know that Google and some other company are sometimes giving money to open source software to focus on security. I've posted the link on the chat. Do you believe Jupyter would have any chance to get accepted into something like that?
I think in the near term, I'll have to look at what Nick just posted, but I think this is really ripe for, say, an eager award from the NSF. So with eager awards are something that are limited in funding. They tend to be like 100 to 150,000. But if we could come up with a defined activity to say, like, we really want to establish a security program for Jupyter, and sometimes they're used to host workshops, but fortunately we already have the NumFocus money. So I think there's the near term for it. And then I think there's the question of longer term. Is this an activity where NumFocus should support some folks directly, like they have with the resident developer and things like that, or if there's some other communities that might have a membership model that can drive it. So those are the ideas that sort of come off the top of my head.
That's awesome. Do people have any final thoughts while we're here still?
I hope that this becomes a focus slow burn focus in the same way that the accessibility stuff's trying to. It is fairly thankless. So thank you for all of you who care about this. It'll make us better and happier people.
I appreciate the feedback, and I'll put Rick and Rollin, and Tiffany, if she's up for showing up, on the agenda for Thursday morning to ask about what we might be able to do there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And woohoo, these have all been such great agenda items. Thank you all. And now I'm sure we're going to get one more great agenda item from David. Yes? David.
Yes, hi.
Okay, there you are.
Sorry.
No
let me share my screen. So, can you see my screen?
I can see a terminal. Is that what you're intending to share? Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. So I want to show a new kernel that I'm working on, which is called a kernel. So it's an asynchronous Python kernel. So let's start a notebook. So let's start with IPyKernel. So as you know, probably in IPyKernel, you can await at the top level like that. Is it big enough? So you can await here at the top level, which is a nice feature, but unfortunately, it still blocks the kernel. So if I launch basically the same code in the next cell, it's going to be run after the first one, which is not really what you expect when you have async IO. Usually you want things to be run in parallel. So it's nice because here you can run a function which is depending on async IO features, but still you would expect to have a concurrent behavior. And that's what a kernel is about. So let's run the same code here, and the next cell is executed concurrently. So that's one of the features of a kernel. That's basically the main feature of a kernel, and which is already kind of cool. And also I can show that it can already solve some problems that we have with some widgets. For example, this one executed with IPyKernel. It's a widget from Unfolded. It's basically a mapping widget. And what happens with this widget is that it's fetching some information from the front end, and this code, which should work, actually blocks. It's trying to get the layers from the front end, but it cannot receive the message because it's blocking executing some code. It's kind of a deadlock, and that's something that's an issue we have in IPy widgets. But so it could be solved at the IPy widget level, but it can also be solved by a kernel at the kernel level. So let's run the same code. And now I can retrieve the layers because the await is basically not preventing the kernel from receiving the message from the front end. So I just wanted to share that. It's very, very early stage of development, but might be evolving quickly in the future. That's it for me.
That's so cool. Thank you for sharing early.
That's rad. So does this work with stuff like, can I use like the thing? Yeah, can I use like Trio with this?
So now it's using pure async IO, no Trio yet, or I know also any IO would be a cool library to support because it's basically an abstraction layer on top of async IO, which gives some Trio-like features, but you don't care basically if the backend is Trio or async IO. So yeah, this is a nice direction for development, but right now it's only pure async IO. So it's obviously it raises a lot of questions because like now all cells are run concurrently, and is it really what we want? I mean, you don't want all your code to run in parallel, so there are semantics to be invented. For example, if I share my screen again, so we saw that these two cells are run concurrently. Actually, I could. Some nice stuff is just like to spy the execution live. You know, if I execute this cell, I can see what's going on live.
Oh, that's crazy.
But what if you would like this one to be spawned as a task and this one to be executed after the previous one? So right now the semantic is this one. Task is always the last cell that was launched. And now this one is going to wait for this one to be finished. But I could like also run another one in parallel. So you can basically compose any asynchronous pattern you want with that.
Have you thought
I
of
love what? Oh, sorry.
Switching and having the synchronous by default to not change current notebook, and by being async, like instead of await task, you would do something like async cell?
Yeah, so you're thinking more like an IPython magic, something like that, to say this cell is going to be launched as a task?
I'm not sure. I just worried about compatibility with previous notebooks and having being opt-in instead of opt-out.
So actually it doesn't. If your cells are not asynchronous, if they don't have an await word in them, it falls back to the default behavior. Because this cell is blocking, it's going to pause the execution of this one. So let's try. So this one is not giving back the control to the event loop. So this one is blocked, and it's going to resume when this one is done. See?
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't use the await at the top level, you have the same behavior as IPy basically.
So I think you're actually, so I love what you're doing here, David, because it raises some difficult teaching challenges, but like, is Jupyter the right place to learn about concurrency? I have a hard time with some of the education on concurrency. Like, I can see this being like a really cool substrate to learn about that programming method. The other thing that I'm seeing, at least when I'm teaching folks to write notebooks, is that restart and run all or it didn't happen. So I could imagine testing this without the asynchronous kernel just to verify that it runs through, but then on something like Voila or an interactive application, this becomes awesome, right?
Yeah. That's. I also think that it can really show its potential when designing dashboards and of course using Voila and so on, because when you are using IPy widgets and widgets in general, you quickly fall in the kind of callback hell, because you have to observe some traits in order to do some action, and basically you use callbacks everywhere, and it's becoming quite complex. And I think this kind of concurrent cell can solve this problem, because you're always still in the notebook. You're not somewhere else, you executing some function that cannot have an output in the notebook, for example. But as far as using that to teach asynchronous, maybe, yeah, it's not the right tool to do.
So you don't have to use sleep or for loops. You could watch for an event like a semaphore or a push on a shared queue and print the new value which is pushed on the queue.
In order to observe traits?
I don't know, you basically, if you want to analyze something which is dynamic, like a live event stream or something like that.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. But then, yeah, it's kind of blocking on this thing still. And you cannot execute the rest of your notebook. So, yeah. But anyway, it's just wanted to share that. And yeah, some people at Unfolded are interested in that because basically they cannot solve their widget issue right now. So yeah, let's see how it goes.
Do you think this will wind up with we'll eventually get some better async support in widgets and stuff like that?
The thing is, they are pushing towards this direction, like to have at least asynchronous handling of COM messages in IPyWidget, but it's kind of dangerous because it breaks some assumptions, very low-level assumptions that we really don't know about all the consequences. So it could be an opt-in behavior that the widget designer chooses to take at his own risk. But yeah, we're not sure to merge that. But it's one of the potential solutions.
Any other thoughts from anyone? Okay. Yeah.
I just know the fact that we have this top level await statement. I made a little hack for IPython that gives you top level return statements. So you can use return and get displays in different places. But I guess at some point this await stuff is going to be Python proper, right? Like the top level await statement is a PEP or something. Is that going to change how await stuff gets implemented in the kernel? I know Matthias had to fight pretty significantly to get this top level await statement.
I would love to have something like that in core IPython. IPython has just such a complexity of what it supports that it's relatively hard to add right now until we know the end semantics. Right now, I'm not even sure IPython is completely compatible Python 3.10.
Time will tell.
Thank you for a great demo, David, though. That was, at least for me, very clear. Like, you really explained it well. I loved seeing the comparison. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, we've still got a few minutes if people want to return to any topics. Probably not enough time for a bout of inspiration for a new share, but any last thoughts? Anything?
I just want to give a shout out to the team working on lab. Started rolling RC2 on a couple things, and if you follow all the rules and you write a document viewer, it's just going to work with the collaborative editing stuff. It's kind of insane. My jaw literally dropped the first time that it worked for IPyDrawIO. So it's going to be very exciting. Whole new crop of problems.
Sorry, did you say RTC in IPyDrawIO?
Yeah, it just worked.
It just worked. It just worked. Okay, that's amazing.
You don't get present. You don't know who's selecting things, but it just works. Yeah.
Yeah, one person moves something, changes the text. It just happens.
I'm probably going to cry after this call. That's kind of amazing. Let me find a link for IPyDrawIO in case anyone needs it. That sounds like a future share, but what do I know?
What does observable do await-wise? Is observable notebooks concurrent async, or are they blocking? Does anybody know? It rewrites all your code.
It's
Yeah,
weird
I
because
don't know.
cells
you
are
can't copy and
values.
paste stuff. Yeah, you can't copy and paste stuff into normal JavaScript. It's like Magix, except it's not explicit.
I have a quick question about RTC in Jupyter Hub, so the server side. Is there somehow it's really cool that it's landing in Jupyter Lab, but is there anything where to read up on what's happening on the Hub side?
I think there might be an issue where people are trying to coordinate that actually. Oh, wait, we have a raised hand. Oh, no, that was you. Sorry. Let me look for that for you.
Yeah, Sylvan's. Is your hand up, Sylvan?
Yeah, I just wanted to offer a response. We don't support it. It's at the moment it's we're connected to the same
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, we're kind of stuck with the YJS architecture now with all of its, joys. And what we've done to make it work on whatever that thing's called, Jupyter Lite, we use the WebRTC based one. So your client calls out to a signaling server that you'd be able to stand up on your hub as a managed service. Right now there's a Node.js based one, but whatever, we can re-implement that and whatever makes sense at scale for the deployment purposes, and you would specify that. So instead of using the one on your individual server, you'd preload all your environments with use this other lab extension, swap out that backend, put this other one in, and be able to use it that way. It's still not going to answer all your presence questions of like what your name is, and certainly not going to do any of your authorization, but it would work, and you'd at least not be phoning out to some third-party SaaS or something like that.
Do you have any link to where this is described?
Are you asking for what Nick described?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know.
But if there's just any reference, really would be great.
Well, that's what you're going to find about YJS. You kind of have to go read the code.
Oh, well, YJS is rather well documented, but I guess
Sylvan, you're really far away. I can kind of hear you. But...
Oh, I'm sorry about that. It's because I was using my headset. Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, regarding the integration with Hub, we don't have a good solution right now, but it's like the main focus of the team of like having a proper oath and meaning authentication story and like presence and sort of UI. And the main challenge is that there are so many deployment scenarios and authentication stories around Jupyter that it's a really tough range of use cases to address at once. And I don't think we can tackle this in the 2 minutes that remain on this call.
Well, it's just, documenting it, making the YJS stuff, like there's so many magic numbers. It's just like, whatever, let's just make a random number. Establishing some of those types so that it's more predictable for what the client is going to expect, I think is the thing forward, and making more parts of it pluggable. I mean, right now we've got like the one thing, and you get one thing. You can't have, if there were multiple providers, you couldn't use multiple providers. So someone's going to have to write the meta provider, like the contents provider. So you kind of get what you get.
So in summary, work in progress. But thank you for asking, though. I think it's a really important question.
Thanks.
Hope to see you on some of the discussions in the future, but we'll see. Well, we've hit the hour, everyone. First of all, if you have to run now to another call, feel free. All I'm going to do is wrap up and tell you when the next call is. So thank you all for being here today. I really appreciate your time. I hope you had a great time as well, because those are amazing shares today and a lot of topics I hadn't heard here before. The next call is going to be on August 31st. You can also give feedback on this call. Let me get you the link. It's basically just a few questions that say, hey, was the audio broken? And did you have a nice time? And any other feedback. And you can already sign up for the next call if you've been so wildly inspired by these great shares. That's the August 31st agenda. And I hope to see you all in a month. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Isabella.
Oh, I'm going to stop recording now.